Hi, my name is John Hatch, and this is a 5th, 6th grade math lesson on relating fractions, decimals, and percents. And for this lesson, what you need is a math notebook, a pencil, and a 4-function calculator. And if you need a moment to go get it, go ahead and do that right now, and we'll go over the standards for the lesson and the vocabulary. The first standard, NF A1, understand that parts of a whole can be expressed as a fraction and as a decimal. NF A2, convert decimals to fractions and fractions to decimals. Vocabulary for this lesson. Let's take a look over on the right side. There's a period that's in between those numbers. That's a decimal point, and that separates the whole number from the decimal or the fractions of that number. Right behind that decimal point is the tenths. And I think of that as like 10 dimes that make up a dollar. The next number behind it, that's in the second place behind the decimal, is the hundredths. And that's like 100 pennies that make up $1. This next place value is the thousandth place. And that's 3 numbers behind the decimal. And when in this example, we're looking at drivers, and they were driving 190 miles an hour. And to be able to find out who was in first, who was in second, when they were comparing their times, they have to go to the thousandths of a place, or 3 places behind the decimal. So that's the reason why the numbers go out even further, so they can become even more precise. Let's take a look at the left side. We have whole numbers. And our example for that is we have 2 pizzas right there. Fraction, that pepperoni pizza has been divided into 6 slices, and the one that's sticking out right there makes it 1/6 of that pepperoni pizza. Apart, slices must be the same size for it to be a fraction. So if you look at the example of, I'm going to think that that's a cheese pizza on the right side, that some of those slices are like really, really tiny. So they're not the same as the ones that are in the middle. So we can't really call those fractions because they're not all the same size. If we look at the pepperoni pizza on the left side, those slices are really close to being the same size. And so we can refer to that as being like in fraction form. For converting, you can have a fraction that's 2/6, and we can say that it's equal to 0.33. So that shows converting a fraction to a decimal. Or another example, 3/6 being equal to 0.50 or 50%. These next two are equivalent and simplest form. We have the fraction 2/6, 2/6, and it's been reduced down to its simplest form of 1/3. Another example is 3/6. So if you have 3 slices of that pepperoni pizza, out of the 6, you have half of that pizza. When you go from 3/6 to changing it to saying 1/2, it's the same thing. You've reduced it down to its simplest form. All right, let's look at these decimals and these percents in the right 2 columns, and let's look for similarities. Well, in the first row, I see a 1 is in both of those columns. And the next one, I see a 5 is in both those columns. Then I see 33 and 25. Oh, there's like 2 numbers behind each of those. But when it's 20%, that's the same as the 50% above. Oh, so when it's the 0 at the end, they can drop that off. Okay. When it's 16.7%, that became 0.167. So the numbers stayed the same, and they just moved it behind the decimal. Okay, I see how that works. A percent is a fraction of 100. You can multiply a decimal by 100 to convert a number from a decimal to a percent, and then you add the percent sign at the end. To convert a fraction to a decimal, you divide the numerator by the denominator. Here we have 25 cents, a quarter, next to a dollar, and we first write it out as 25 of 100. Well, we can also say that's 25 cents of $1. Or that's 25% of $1. And down at the bottom now, we see how those are relating with the 0.25 as the decimal and 25%. In our next example, we have 45 cents compared to $1, and it's 45 of 100. Right there we have it as 45 cents of $1. And right here we have it as 45% of 1. And again, on the bottom there we have it related where you can see the decimal is 45 hundredths, and we can see how that's compared to 45%. This next one, fractions and decimals. We have the 4 over 4 on top. 4 quarters make $1, so all of them are there. In the bottom example, we only have 3 of the 4. So on the top part, that became 1 as in $1. On the bottom part, that's 3/4 becomes 0.75 or 75%. And the way that we got that is we take the numerator, 3, and you divide by the denominator, 4, and you get 0.75 or 75 hundredths. In this next one, we see the 4/4 up there at the top again, and down below we have 1/4 or 1/4. And we know that that's 25 cents, and we can see that's 25%, and we got the 25% or 0.25 by taking the numerator of 1 and dividing by 4, and you get 0.25. Now, we showed some with money. Here's an example of one where we're not using money. We have 3 over 5, or 3/5. So you take the numerator 3 and you divide it by the denominator 5, and you get 0.6. Here's another example, 4/9. So we're going to take the numerator of 4, divide it by the 9, and you get 0.44. Well, let's try a few together. So we're going to convert between decimals and percents. So we have 0.15, we want to change that to a percent. 0.43 or 43 hundredths, we want to change that to a percent. The next one we have 58%. Well, how do you write that as a decimal? 67%, we're going to write that as a decimal. And then we have 0.8 as a decimal, but how do we write that as a percent? Well, let's take a look at the first one. Oh yeah, this is where the 15 becomes 15. We drop the decimal point, or you multiply by 100, and you get 15, and then we put the percent sign behind. Well, the next one would be really similar then. There's the 43, and it becomes 43%. Well, now they have us going the other way. So we know that it's going to be the 58, but we're going to have a decimal point at the beginning of it. The next one is the 67. We're going to have 67 and have the decimal point at the beginning of it. And remember, with the 0.8, when you make the percent, we need to have as 2 decimals, or two digits. So it's going to be 80%. All right, so fractions and decimals, we're going to write the 2/4 as a decimal. So first, we're going to start off with it as a fraction, 2 over 4, 2/4. And we're going to divide 2 by 4, and we get 50.50 or 50 hundredths. Now, we're going to have you try it on your own. We have 8/10, 1/5, and 4/7. And let's convert those into a decimal and a percent. You have a minute and a half. All right, let's take a look to see how you did. The 8 over 10 as a fraction becomes 0.80 as a decimal and 80%. If you did it like that, nice job. The next one was 1 over 5. We see it as 1/5. It became 0.20 as a decimal, 20 hundredths, and 20%. The last one, 4 over 7, became 0.57 or 57 hundredths and 57%. So we found out how to relate a fraction, a decimal, and a percent. We found out that a percent is a fraction of 100. And you can multiply decimal by 100 to convert a number from a decimal to a percent, then add a percent sign. You can also convert a fraction to a decimal by dividing the numerator by the denominator. Hey, thanks for being a part of our lesson today. Make sure you take care of the homework assignment as well. Have a good week.